For those who are already in the call, welcome. We might wait for just a few minutes. Not more than one, I would suggest, just to be on time. It's a quick format, so we really have to start on time. By welcoming everybody who's on that call, join us for our first virtual coffee break called GLC Face to Face, where we will talk about digital learning. This first episode is called What Changed Digital Learning in Times of Crisis, which is obviously about the current COVID-19 situation around the globe. My name is Christian. I'm from the team of the Global Learning Council, a cross-sector think tank on digital education with global thought leaders on this. Two are actually our panelists today. Suzanne Walsh, President of the Bennett College in the US, and Bitange Ndemo is a professor at the University of Nairobi. We will have 20 minutes of a moderated discussion. I brought a few questions to both of our panelists, and afterwards we will pick up your questions, for which you can use the Q&A form in the panel below. So feel free to put any questions that come to your mind right in this Q&A tool, and we will pick these up after 20 minutes. So once again, welcome Bitange, welcome Suzanne. It's so good to have you both here. My first question is actually directed to both of you, but I may start with Suzanne. Tell us a bit on the current situation at your college, and if you're able to also in the US or North Carolina, where it is based in general, how the situation is right now and how it impacts on higher ed.
Thank you. So Bennett College is a historically Black college for women in Greensboro, North Carolina. So it's a small city in North Carolina. We have had, for the longest time, actually, this county had one of the highest percentages of deaths per diagnosis of COVID. So this is a very serious situation in our county. But prior to COVID really hitting this county, we actually vacated our campus. So we're a residential institution. We vacated our campus. All of the public institutions, the large universities also vacated campus. The challenge for us was that we're an institution, because we are residential, we are not set up to teach remotely or online or distance education. So in a matter of days, literally days, our faculty had to completely change how they delivered instruction to our students, and our students had to get used to taking classes remotely. Students don't pick us because they want to take classes online. That's a contrast to maybe the larger universities across the US, but also within North Carolina, where they have at least maybe one or two online classes that students are taking. So the transition has been dramatic, to say the least.
Okay. Bitange, how's the situation in Kenya right now?
Yes, I'm speaking from Nairobi. I teach at the University of Nairobi. It's the largest university in Kenya. The same as Bennett College, we were shoved into this new normal of teaching. It has taken us a while. We started with graduate students who are much easier to access because they are fewer, and most of them have connectivity. For undergraduate, we still have some challenges because they are spread across the country. And those who went to rural areas, for example, they have difficulty in terms of accessing broadband in those areas. As far as COVID-19 is concerned, in Kenya we have lost only 7, and I think the entire Africa is about 500. There is a debate that we may not have as much impact as the Northern Hemisphere. Some people are suspecting because suspecting things like BCG, which was administered in most southern countries. So we still don't know, but we're still under lockdown. We have curfews that we must be home before 7. Then we have some cities which have been locked out, the ones that have the most number of infected. But most of those who are infected actually get to recover. That's why we are suspecting either polio vaccine or BCG may have had some impact.
So universities, Bitange, are all closed right now?
The schools are all closed, universities are closed. It was baptism by fire to move into online learning because not most of the faculty who are used to this, especially the older ones. I think this time around, everything was negative for anybody who was older, from the disease to learning fast and stuff like that.
Okay, maybe another question to actually both of you as a follow-up. In terms of online pedagogy, what concepts do you think actually show now that they work or don't work? Because of some of the actually most promising aspects about digital learning combine the aspect of physical and virtual learning aspects, like for example, flipped classroom concepts, what have you. How do you see this in the current situation?
I start?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay. I think the physical appearance in class and teaching, there's some emotional aspects that you miss when you are doing it virtually. But what I've discovered is that it is very difficult. Once you have more than 20 students, it becomes chaotic because most are young, most leave, most they play their music or do something, and you're not able to fully control that aspect because sometimes you don't know where it's coming, the noise is coming from, and I think maybe it is too early to know that we may not get used to the new normal, but there is some aspect of the physical teaching physically in class. I don't know whether it's for me, but that is what I've experienced.
And I think what we're seeing is, so I deliberately referred to our transition as going to remote learning, not online learning, because online learning has a very specific sort of approach and it implies we're using a single platform. And because we have so many students, much like Bitange talked about, we also have students who are in rural North Carolina or rural parts of the United States or in inner city parts of the United States where they don't have reliable internet. And so every single faculty member had to put together a remote action plan. And we have a range. So we have some people who are using Moodle. And then we have one professor who I like to talk about all of the time because she knew her students were so small. She knew her students and knew that they would not have access to reliable internet. And what I refer to her work as currently is, it's like correspondence school. So she is using email and she is using Word. And she's probably getting some of the best response to her classes because she knew that they wouldn't be able to do Zoom, they wouldn't be able to stream video because students don't have reliable access to internet, but also that the data plan is very expensive, even if you wanted to stream. So we have a range of approaches, and I think at the end of the semester, it will be really interesting to compare to see what people are doing. But it is, I think part of the pedagogy question is, what are faculty members ready to do? And then what do students have access to? A place like University of Central Florida, I think their faculty I think they take about 80 hours of training before they teach online. We didn't have time to do that. So we didn't have time to prepare. What this also, I think, exposes is just generally one's pedagogical approach. Have you really been working on and updating how you think about learning outcomes? You have to always go back to the basics. How are you thinking about the learning outcomes? How are you thinking about the competencies? And how are you able to demonstrate that students have made progress on those things? Ultimately, that's what matters, not the platform, but how are you able to demonstrate that students have made progress? And the last thing I'll just say that's different is that there's a piece of this where not only do faculty have to change the way that they're delivering instruction, but students have to learn how to learn differently. And as Bitange talked about, I think our faculty are spending a lot of time explaining how to help students understand how to spend their time. So I think that in terms of the way that COVID-19 has challenged us, it's challenged everybody, the students, and as well as the faculty.
If we talk about socioeconomic differences, for example, or other social gaps that might occur, do you think that in the current situation, some of them might be more pronounced than in the regular teaching?
I think I've always said that the crisis actually usually brings out inequalities and injustices. And this is what we have begun to see. And so when we were debating to change the policies for teaching, we said we must buy the data bundles for students. And that is what the university did, so that you don't get people who are saying, I can't afford this, I can't. Well, some don't have laptops, which is a very few number. But of course, we say if you have a smartphone, you could use it. Like Suzanne was saying, we don't know how effective it is. We are going to review that again. We are now struggling to figure out the method that we are going to use to test these students. So we're still learning in the process.
And I think, part of what I've said to people is I feel like this crisis very much highlights, I think this is an expression that translates internationally, but the haves and the have-nots. And so we see, the people or the institutions that are ready, and they already have been working digitally, or they already have access to technology, they just continue to excel and they can quickly make this transition. For a college like Bennett College, which did not have all of these things in place, and our students don't all have access to laptops, they have cell phones, but they don't have access to laptops. It just highlights that inequality. And one of the things I tweeted about, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, was that everyone talks about supply chain in higher education, meaning our enrollments will drop. We'll all see a decline in the US in terms of enrollment. But what I'm actually worried about is the supply chain as it relates to hardware for students to be able to have access to laptops. So if some of our students left campus and they weren't worried about access to internet because public libraries were a place they could go when they left us because we closed quite early or vacated campus quite early. Now they can no longer go to the library, so they don't have access to laptops. We also don't have a supply to give out. We have to purchase them. So again, if you're already a wealthy institution, you already had students with the access, you're in a different position. One of the other things, though, that I do think has been exciting is we're part of a women's college coalition, which is within the United States. And one of our other women's colleges has offered their platform. So they've offered to the other women's colleges to say, if you would like to take advantage of using some of our classes or some of our coursework, you can do that. So I think there's also starting to be, while there is that gap, there's starting to be ways that we can sort of close the gap by working more collaboratively. There are a couple of questions, Christian, in the chat. Do you want us to respond to those, or?
Not immediately. I think
Okay.
my colleague Anne will put those up in a couple of minutes. So to the audience, once you have questions, please feel absolutely free to put them in the Q&A form. One may argue that this also promotes a window of opportunity to foster digital learning. How do you see that? Is that a sustainable perspective? And is it actually good digital learning? Is it a good transformation that is ongoing right now, or is it just the challenge from one day to another to translate the pedagogy and the content that we have into a digital format?
I think after, if this goes on for another 6 months, some graduate programs may never go back to where we were. I find, especially PhD students, they find it very, very comfortable because they are at home, they are mature. In fact, some of them were asking why are they been hustling through traffic jams to go to the university and then drive home at night and stuff like that. So I'm going to see a lot of change, and because it probably will be a little cheaper than the physical attendance in classrooms, I think we are going to make education more accessible and affordable through these platforms. I think this is what is going to happen. That's my thinking.
I think that I think it is a window of opportunity to explore in what ways can technology support student learning. I don't think it's ever going to completely replace in person. I think the question becomes when and where is it most appropriate to use digital or face-to-face. I think we still have to sort of figure that out and think about multiple modalities, because the reason, again, I use the term remote learning as opposed to online is because online means something very specific. And so I think probably this is an opportunity for digital learning if we think about that truly encompassing that wide range of what it means to be sort of virtual, basically. But the other thing that I was really struck by in one of our Global Learning Council meetings recently with executives from Microsoft was the discussion about moving forward. This is not the last time we will have lockdowns, as they call them. And actually they were predicting that we will have more frequent but shorter periods of time where we would have to do this. That's the thing that I've really been thinking about for the past couple of weeks is, what does that look like? Because if that's the case, we will always have to have some sort of digital or remote learning or online learning plans in place, because we can't do this constant in and out with no plan to look ahead. We can't constantly adjust at the last minute. And so I think that's one of the things that's going to change us is really the reality of, if we must be flexible and always on guard and always prepared, that means we will all have to have some sort of plan moving forward. But I want us to think about it in a way that allows for a range of solutions and doesn't just see there's only one way to do this.
Thank you. As you might have all seen, my colleague Anne just dialed in to give us the questions from the audience. Exactly. It doesn't mean you have to stop. If you still have questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A form.
I think I'm going to start with the first one that popped up, which was directed at Suzanne and asked, what do the remote action plans consist of in terms of principles? And are academics allowed to employ any strategy that works? And if so, how can you manage these?
So because we are so small, we only have, I think we have a total of about 60 faculty members. So that's much more manageable, I think, than most places. And we did, every single faculty member could choose how he or she wanted to deliver instruction. we don't know what strategies will work, quite frankly. I mean, this is an experiment, but what each faculty member did was take into consideration his or her discipline, what needed to be accomplished for the rest of the semester, and the context in which their students were going to have to learn moving forward. So we have a lot to study afterwards. I don't think we have it fully figured out, but I do think what we were able to do was the right thing for our students and the right thing for our faculty. But we will have to see at the end of the semester what works. And let me add one more thing, because your question about how do we manage all of this? I've also signaled to faculty in the last couple of weeks that they have to be prepared with remote plans for the fall, because we may need to start the year remote as well. And so they have to look to see how to improve their classes and their approaches for the fall. So again, we're in an experimental stage.
Maybe I can just follow up, because there's another question that asks how in this short-term switch, how to monitor which measures work well. And because you just said that it would, then you'd have to see how things work and what, you would then implement going forward. How do you monitor that when there's these new strategies that are happening?
We're using two different things to try to track this. One is we've asked faculty members to keep more or less a daily log so that we have their reflections and reflections of their students. We do check-ins with students as well. And then we'll have to go back and look at the learning outcomes that the faculty outlined in their syllabi for the beginning of the semester, and look to see how students have progressed on those learning outcomes. We're trying to keep, our accrediting body here is called SACS. It's the Southern Association for Schools and Colleges. And the accrediting body language, I think, is the right language, which is we're trying to make sure that we're keeping track of academic integrity, but we have to be flexible in this moment. And academic integrity always comes back to learning outcomes and competencies. Did I answer?
Yes. I just had my microphone.
No, sorry.
I have one more question, which was aimed at both of you, but maybe Bitange, you can start with this one. Do teachers join in doing digital learning? And if so, do you have any idea of how many that would be percentage-wise?
We have a staff complement of 4,000, almost 5,000. I don't think everybody has started to teach. There are those who are trying to resist. There are those who are going ahead to teach. So we are busy learning to see that everybody gets enough training. I think a bunch of them have gone for training, almost 40%. I don't think we would get 100% within this semester. So we still have some problems. We have a faculty union, which is very strong, which usually says this is an ambush. We need more training. So you need to be very careful not to rush it. So eventually, I think everybody would understand that we are not in this by choice, but because of the crisis. That is, if it goes beyond 6 months, I think everybody will be back to teach.
Yeah, only a few of our faculty were using, I would say, digital learning techniques. We have one faculty member who creates all of her own simulations online. She was doing that before. And we have a couple others who integrate some technology, but most of them have not been teaching remotely. Or digitally, sorry, I should say.
Maybe you can just pick up one question, which is actually in the chat from our colleague Alexandros from Microsoft. What are your priorities? What priorities would you see to prepare for the fall semester?
Bitange, do you want to start?
Well, I would say fall semester is far away. everybody hopes that this thing ends by July and we are in the normal space. But if that doesn't happen, I think there'll be more effort to work very closely with the accrediting agencies and make sure that we have the right thing, the right pedagogy for students and staff. Fall is very far. It's very far. It's very far from now.
And I feel like the fall or the autumn is like right in front of me because we start in August, early August. And so the priorities, I think, are a few things. One is helping to support our faculty in terms of preparing, again, remote plans for the fall as a just-in-case matter. And I see there's a question in the Q&A about who can help institutions move on the right track. We're the digital learning experts. And I think within the US, to me, helping our faculty prepare, I look to places like the University of Central Florida, though gigantic, way bigger than us, their approach to helping faculty to prepare, I think is just phenomenal for preparing to teach online. But I think more importantly, and this is why I love being part of the Global Learning Council, I think there are lessons from Africa, there are lessons from Asia. We have to expand where we look for answers, because I think we probably have far more in common, at least my college does, with some of those other institutions in other parts of the world. So I don't fully know who the experts are, but finding those experts is another one of the priorities, and finding them globally to help, I think, inspire innovation is really important for us. And then the last thing that I'll just say is we have a number of students who have accessibility needs. So they have learning disabilities, or they have other things where they need extra online support. So while at the same time we focus on improving individual classes, we also are focusing on how we support our students who may have learning disabilities, because we have to incorporate that kind of technology into the classes as well. It's not just the classroom virtually, it's also figuring out how to make sure that students are supported in the ways that they need to be successful.
Thank you both very, very much. You're already at the end of this first episode. Wow, it's fast. Yes, I think so as well. It's just half an hour, so hope everybody finished his or her coffee. You can join us all in 2 weeks from now with the second episode with Carl Wyman from Stanford University, professor of physics and a Nobel laureate, and Volker Meyer-Guckel from the German Stifterverband, who will both talk about what works in terms of digital education in the current situation. And please check on our website, globallearningcouncil.org. The advertisement, Suzanne already did it. For further announcements, follow us on Twitter and give us feedback to this episode if you liked it or not. And also, I think my colleagues just shared the link in the chat that you can also join our discussions on a Mattermost channel we just installed. So once again, thank you both. Thank you, Bitange, very much. Thank you, Suzanne, very much. And everybody have a good day. Stay safe and hope to see you in 2 weeks.
Bye.
Goodbye.